Welcome to White Hat Riddles, a podcast about cybersecurity and compliance. I'm Angel, head of marketing of SoCyber and Kikimora.
And I'm Krasi, a cybersecurity expert and founder of SoCyber and Kikimora.
We are here to help you better understand the cybersecurity field and bring you guests from around the world who are actively working on securing IT infrastructure.
On a daily basis, we receive so many calls and messages from people who became victims of cyber attacks. They're looking for help. They need assistance. So we decided, instead of helping every person individually, to create something bigger, a cybersecurity podcast where we educate people and teach you on the latest cybersecurity matters.
We have an interesting lineup of guests coming up in the next few months, so stay tuned and listen in.
How can you do ethical hacking? Is it something like ethical hacking? Can the hacking be ethical at all? And then we say, yes, it can be. There is good hackers and bad hackers, also known as white hat hackers, telling white hat riddles, of course, and black hat hackers, who are the malicious guys. They're doing extortion. They want to steal your money, your financial data, or your IT assets, eventually encrypt your files, and then ask for some huge ransom to decrypt your files. And we're the white hat hackers who are saving the world, the Batman in the cybersecurity area. Yeah,
a nice role that you've picked up for yourself. I'm not Robin, man. I'll be the Arnold Schwarzenegger guy. What was the name? Mr. Freeze.
Yeah.
All right. So something else, some other things that we plan to cover in the podcast, obviously. We will focus on things that can help small businesses at least be prepared. We understand how budgets work. We understand that not everyone can afford expensive cybersecurity services, but the most common cyber threats are actually coming from things which we can take care of with some training, with some education, and obviously with understanding where the attacks can come from. Statistics show that over 70% of the hacking and essentially any malicious behavior starts with some form of social engineering or phishing attack. And this is an enormous burden for businesses, obviously education and other related activities.
You mentioned, by the way, businesses, that we help businesses, which is true. But we not only help businesses, but organizations in general, because we also help non-government agencies. Right now, we're focused on hospitals, by the way, so improving the information security awareness in healthcare facilities. Healthcare providers might be considered businesses as well, but they are helping the society. They're helping people to be alive, to be healthy. So let's call them organizations. But basically, everybody who is facing cyber attacks or is somehow storing sensitive private data, is maybe digital native company risking because they have IT assets or applications. They provide some applications to the users. Everybody who might be in danger of cyber attacks, we're helping them with identifying the weaknesses and the gaps before the bad hackers will do it. Of course, we're a business as well, but we helped numerous organizations in the past without any profit.
Well, one thing that probably people are not familiar with is that as a cybersecurity company, you also need to be compliant and follow the compliance rules.
Yep.
So essentially, we do understand how this thing works, and cybersecurity compliance and insurance and things are also very complex, I would say, to an extent.
You mentioned compliance. Compliance is a bad word.
Yeah.
And usually, because in the cybersecurity industry, we are always getting the question, okay, does it mean if I'm compliant, does it mean that I'm secure?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a huge difference. But usually, if you are compliant, eventually you are secure as well in many cases. But being compliant means that you have to follow specific rules. You have to follow, you need to have established procedures and policies in your organization, proper risk assessment program so that you can identify what's the danger, what would be the impact for your specific organization. But then it doesn't necessarily mean that you are secure. You can actually be compliant without being secure. And I've seen so many organizations who are just compliant for the sake of the compliance itself. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, I've seen a lot of companies which are secure, but not necessarily compliant.
Yeah. Well, that actually brings me a question that I have on my mind, right? How does it work? Does the government bodies or let's say European institutions first outline the issues and they create the compliance framework, or they first look at what the issues are out in the wild and then they create a framework? How does it work?
Both, actually. That's a very good question. The European institutions, and in general the institutions worldwide, they work with experts. So they hire people like me and you to help them with establishing the rules, that the framework that needs to be applied in specific sector, let's say in the society. Of course, first of all, they have to identify the threats. So they're looking at the threat landscape. What are the countries where the attacks are originating from? What's the frequency? Are they deploying some malware? What exactly are the malicious activities coming from those countries? And then they focus on the intention. So what is usually that hackers are looking for? Is it financial benefits? Is it to bring someone's reputation down, or to disrupt, let's say, an electrical facilities operations, which might be crucial for the functioning of the society? And when they look at the threat landscape, only then they would consider specific sectors to be part of some framework. So they are carefully selecting the rules to be applied for each individual sector based on the threat landscape and the requirements in this specific industry. And then they also hire cybersecurity experts who are on the front line monitoring the attacks. And as they see change in the way hackers are compromising systems, they are adopting the frameworks to serve the needs of the organizations.
All right. I think that will be very helpful for people that are looking to understand what actually is going on with these policies. And another thing that's probably in like a hot topic on the industry is, where do threats come from for European businesses, right? You know how let's say politics are now they're shifting a lot right now, but what is the common threat, let's say, for the European Union? What do you think?
Are you asking me or Trump? If you're asking Trump or Zelensky,
JD Vance,
threats they come from Russia, of course, and North Korea. But out of joke, actually threats come from many countries. And by the way, statistics indeed show that threats are mostly coming from countries like ex-Soviet countries, not necessarily Russia, but ex-Soviet countries, as well as North Korea, China, countries from the East. They have like very strong cyber army of experts.
But is it, let's say, for example, we know that the country with the most, let's say, contributions and investment in cybersecurity is Israel, right? But are these countries the ones that are creating the threats based on expertise, or it's more let's say lacks of prosecution or the regulations there? Because I do believe that there's a lot of experts in Europe. There's obviously USA is a huge country and they have a lot of expertise. If the size or the budgets were the defining factor, maybe they should have been coming from there.
So there is two different points here. The first one is, if somebody wants to target specific organization, then they would go in Israel and they would hire cybersecurity experts to develop a malware which is suited for this or that company in particular. So they would select specific exploits tailored for the needs of this organization. So that's the first component. The second one is widespread malwares and exploit kits, which are available for public use. These are created by cybersecurity researchers across the world, not a particular country, but everybody, regardless of their nationality. And usually these are created because security researchers, they want to verify the security in specific service or software components. So they start testing, discovering 0 days, but once they discover something, usually they are reporting this one to the vendor. That's called responsible disclosure. When they report it to the vendor, usually that's a piece of code which exploits specific software. When they report it to the vendor, usually the vendor has about 3-4 weeks to remediate, to patch and to provide updated version of the software. And then the security researcher is free to share with the public audience this specific exploit. So usually they're uploading the exploit somewhere on the internet, and everybody, all the security testers, they can already use the exploit. Now there is also financially driven campaign. You mentioned Israel. Israel is one of the richest countries and maybe the country with the best cyber intelligence in the world. However, let's just take as an example one of the Russians hacking. One of the Russian the Russian hacking groups. Only for this organization, they have more than 100 developers and more than 400 security experts distributing, delivering the exploit with the payload to target organizations. And then on top of this one, they work with thousands of security experts across the world to actually spread the malware, to spread the campaigns. So.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, obviously everything depends on the and what is. I think that's something that will be interesting for everyone. Is there a common goal for cybersecurity criminals? Is there like something that they pursue, or it's more let's say it's not a common goal, but rather everyone just wants to exploit systems? Is it like a passion thing? Is it a business thing? What do you think are the core motivations?
There is the hobby perspective indeed. That's how I started when I was 14. It was a hobby for me. So I was just hacking systems for the sake of proving myself that I have the knowledge to beat the system. So definitely there is the hobby element, and I think it's a huge part of the hacking activities out there. But also, a lot of campaigns are sponsored by some government or organization. So, for example, I was expecting, by the way, the war between Russia and Ukraine to be much more cyber-oriented rather than physical war. And you know that now, for example, they are bombarding each other's power grids, power facilities. Yeah. Why would you bombard it when you can just deploy a malware or remote Trojan, which is spreading in the organization and is just stopping the operations, is just stopping the business out there. It makes the systems unavailable for the users or for the engineers who are working with the systems. Immediately, like in a minute, with simple deployment of a piece of code, you can just disable a whole power grid, electricals.
Yeah, and at a lesser. All right, so it's time for a special guest today. Please say hello and welcome to Kristian from SplxAI. He's coming here to share with us his experience with conversational AI security, tell us more about what Splx is doing and what are the challenges and opportunities ahead of us in the era of AI agents. Kristian, please.
Yeah, thank you guys for inviting me to today's podcast. My name is Kristian. I'm one of the two co-founders here at SplxAI. We've been dealing with AI security since over 2 years. 1 year in stealth, 1 year officially, went out with the business. Currently about 25 people in the company, very much research focused. I think what we have seen across the globe is that it doesn't matter what kind of jailbreak or prompt injection has happened a year ago. It's important what's happening today and what kind of attacks we see. And so 0-day attacks are very important. And that's why we are focused on the offensive approach or offensive AI security, call it security testing. I think red teaming, I don't want to offend any red teamer. I think red teaming is specifically black box testing. But we do also a lot of gray box testing with domain-specific know-how and insights proven by the customers giving us before we really attack those kind of LLM applications and chatbots and try to expose the latest vulnerabilities. And with those vulnerabilities, we give recommendations and remediation strategies, how to build better AI firewalls, guardrails, any kind of safeguarding and monitoring and log analysis.
So how does it work? How does the whole system work? We know that a lot of people are using LLMs right now at their work for personal projects and things like that. What is a good time for a company to start considering this type of security, implementing and integrate?
Yeah, very good question. I think we deal with a lot of West Coast because they're customers, so they're producing several AI assistants. built on top of OpenAI or any other LLMs. And they use several models, they use several variations, and then they specifically try to test for hallucinations, accuracy, so Q&A testing, because their customers are asking them to do so. So the why anything is mostly triggered by the end user, and specifically if the end user is a bigger company which is in a regulated business, asking them to do those kind of accuracy testing and performance testing before putting anything in production. So that's why we ideally sit somewhere in the CI/CD pipeline as part of the testing lifecycle and AI dev lifecycle, because AI is changing, right? It's not a one-off test. It's not a traditional pen test where you basically get a report and you go back in 6 months again. AI is changing continuously. Today you have a text-to-text chatbot. Tomorrow you will have pictures, image upload, document upload. We work with one unicorn out of the West Coast called Glean, where we basically test for document upload and try to find vulnerabilities in those documents uploaded in the LLM and the prompt. So a lot of things to inspect, and I think it's not conservative to anticipate that the current attack surface in AI is maybe maximum 5%.
Okay, and what's the news, let's say, on the regulatory kind of like side? Do you have any pressure, let's say, somewhere on the world on implementing AI regulations in terms of using LLMs? What's the status on this?
Yes, in Europe mostly. So I think the UI Act was live in February 5, I think. So a lot of companies and users are concerned because of losing their jobs, potentially losing their jobs, being accountable. I think the biggest problem of adopting AI currently is not that we know that we need to adopt AI, that we need to ship fast, and that we need to secure AI. I think everyone knows that. It's common sense. The problem is accountability. So we spoke with a bank 3 days ago in Europe, Central Europe, and they were like, okay, you do model testing, you do domain testing, you do model safety, domain-specific safety, chatbot safety. But what about the governance and compliance piece? We need to figure out which kind of compliance frameworks we are using and who is accountable for what. What if a breach happens? Who is accountable for what? And we see that more and more shifting to security, which is a good sign, because last year we have been talking mostly to AI people because they understand the non-deterministic behavior of LLMs. But as of now, the shift is clearly significant, that mostly security people, AppSec people, product security people, offensive sec people, DevSecOps are taking care of those things. And it's mostly triggered in Europe by compliance and governance. You can name it. You can name them if it's even Google Safe, or if it's DORA in the banking sector, or even AI Act. They all kind of regulate or talk about specific testing and red teaming within the AI. So as part of the AI life cycle. Yeah. So it's more in Europe, less in the US. As I said before, in the US, it's more accuracy, performance testing, hallucination testing, etc.
Kristian, I had this conversation with Tangio, by the way. Does it mean when we're compliant, does it mean that we are secure necessarily? And the other way around, if we are secure, does it automatically mean that we are complying with the regulations? Because I've seen so many companies striving for compliance. They're trying to achieve all the procedures and policies to make themselves compliant with the regulations, but then they lack security and they still get compromised by hackers. And I've seen companies which are like a fortress, but they don't comply with specific standards and they're not ready to comply. So what's the difference between compliance and security based on your experience?
We are currently very much in a compliance market because it's a wild west of compliance and people don't know what counts and what matters to them. So they're being educated still. And as part of this education, compliance or GRC comes in place. Some people are building an AI compass, which is basically navigating all the compliance frameworks they would need in order to be closely to secure. But I wouldn't say it's security. It's just purely being compliant and being basically click all the boxes which are needed in order to put something in production, because businesses have huge pressure. It's not only about customer-facing AI assistants. It's about internal workflows. It's about the internal AI assistants. It's about agents. And agents are not relying only on one LLM. It's going to be a whole application business application process. So we need to talk about that right now. because otherwise the competition in any other part of the world will basically surpass the traditional companies. And that's why the pressure is on, and that's why everything starts with compliance and governance, because no one has a clue. I mean, without any offense, but it's definitely we're currently in a compliance market, and I wouldn't say that you're necessarily secure. And even with implementing safeguards, we have seen that across the globe that everything has started. Even we have built guardrails for AI 2 years ago, and we have seen, oh well, if you go beyond the allowed and banned behaviors, you can surpass the system prompt, you can still break it, and you can still evade the guardrails and leak the confidential data of the chatbot. So obviously, guardrails and safeguards are not the only solution for AI security. It's continuous testing as one piece, is inspecting the code, it's inspecting data addressed, covering role-based access control, identity AI. So there's many things, and still we cannot say you're 100% sure. So I admire companies going immediately after the testing and immediately after the security pieces, instead of losing themselves in compliance and frameworks, because they will lose business.
Yep, 100%. When you say we are in a compliance market, that brings us to one thing that we're often discussing in the office. That obviously, when you are trying to sell cybersecurity or you're trying to reach new partners, it's more like a fear type of market, because people don't usually want to spend, and you need to kind of convince them. And this brings the question of what is the price to be secure using AI. This will be a lot of questions coming up here. How does it scale? Does it scale similar to, for example, something like AWS, which is probably not the best example, or scales a little bit slower and it can be added easily to your kind of funding for the next year, for the budgeting?
I wouldn't mix the hyperscalers. Of course, the hyperscalers like AWS will have their own safeguards and their own testing and stuff. But you need to look from a cloud security perspective. So when cloud security era began by the end of 2006, 7, or 8, cloud was very new to the market and no one really knew about it, right? And it was very expensive. And it took some while until basically some security names came out of it, like Palo Alto even before, but also Zscaler, where I was at, is that you, in order to secure a critical infrastructure, and which will be AI will become, or is already, you need a third-party vendor, an unbiased opinion to inspect, but to also to protect or detect and protect. Yeah. So I think that the hyperscalers are not really covering that much, and even the AI builders or LLM builders are not really covering that. I mean, we've seen that across the globe, and OpenAI specifically. So I think this is one thing. That's in a nutshell. And I don't know if I answered all your questions. I think I missed the first part.
Yeah, I think I was more thinking in terms of how can someone budget for LLM security, for example. What is the
going back to that? Yeah, sorry. Yeah. And sorry for that. So your question is correct, and I think currently it's more fear. It's more fear of losing a job, accountability, and that's why I think the services market in Gen AI or LLM is huge. I think last year Accenture only did $2.5 billion of revenue in services for Gen AI. So that means people are buying those kind of services in order to get a risk assessment, to get a paper, to get some know-how. And then with that know-how, even they know mostly what they need to do, they will go back and basically do the practitioner stuff, which should have been done before even, I think, right? But it's definitely, as you said correctly, it's kind of an things they don't know, and then fear and accountability.
At some point, I heard you mentioned hallucinations. That's actually a topic I'm quite interested to talk about, mostly because I see people being afraid that AI is going to steal our lives and our jobs and everything. So are we going to have AI robots which are killing the humans, But then I'm always saying that AI cannot go wrong because it's an algorithm which is like predefined what to do and how to teach itself, as long as we keep secure the data that we're feeding AI with. So, but then of course we have hallucinations sometimes, and AI is producing stupid things or maybe things which are funny or not exactly correct. And that's mostly because of hallucinations. What do you think about this one? Is it a danger to security if AI is hallucinating too much, and why is AI hallucinating at all?
Yes, a very important topic. And I think the LLMs behave like the human brain. or they can behave like a human brain. So if I tell you something in the first message, hey, I have a black cat or whatever or something, or my cat's name is Peter, and I repeat it in the third and fourth message, you will basically keep that in your mind. So that's the same way how you can trick a bot or an LLM to hallucinate and to give you basically information it shouldn't give you out. The same is about giving you I don't knows or fake URLs. So there's many possibilities of hallucinations, and it's very hard to safeguard those. That's why we always say that you should have your allowed and meant behaviors. You should have your black box and white box testing. But I think hallucination is a massive issue, and it's based on temperature as well, right? If you keep the conversation, you will basically provoke a hallucination. So that's why limit the length limit to the LLM application, allowed and banned behavior. Maybe limit the language is all important about those inspections and when you're putting things in production.
Yeah, indeed. And then, because we also talked about the LLM chatbots, so based on your perspective, you deal with AI vulnerabilities, and in SoCyber we deal with traditional vulnerabilities in traditional infrastructure. But based on your experience and perspective, what's the difference between a vulnerability in an LLM chatbot compared to a vulnerability in a traditional software? Let's say, how do they differ from each other?
I mean, good question. I think in a lot of perspective they don't really differ, because it's even possible to a similar attack to SQL injection to capture infrastructure or server data through an LLM, right? If you execute some Python code and you do some code or let's say code execution, and it's possible to capture server data even through an LLM if it's connected to that, right? While a lot of attacks are basically based on safety reasons, which is not traditional in the security space, right? In the LLM space. So we talk a lot about safety, bias checking, fairness checking, abuse, harmful content. So this is not really something which has been a topic before, but detection of PII and data exfiltration and data leakage, I think it's very much related to traditional pen testing and security testing. So I think it's getting closer to each other more and more. And as someone said today, we're still trying to be the Russian or Chinese bot within the LLM. So from a mentality perspective, nothing has changed.
Yeah, indeed. but also when we're talking about, because I saw on your website something that drives me very interested, automated and continuous red teaming. And I've been having so many conversations with cybersecurity experts, with information security officers as well. Is it possible to automate a security test completely? Is it possible to continuously automate a pen test, let's say, a red team? And a lot of people are saying that this is not possible because you have business logic testing. You need to behave like a user, which the automation tools are not capable to do. But now maybe with AI, things are changing. So how do you do automated AI red teaming?
Oh, yeah. Very important question. I would even say that the continuous piece is more important than automated, because automated you can do as I said, you can simulate the user behavior in the prompt. Every 2 weeks, we update the platform with our newest logic. So as I said before, it doesn't matter what kind of attack happened a few months ago, because OpenAI patched it anyway. It's about 0-day attacks. So, and we use the domain. That's why we don't call ourselves model testers or model red team. It's when you're in our platform, you give it a kind of a context and you say, hey, I'm an insurance chatbot. I'm selling health insurance to the Eastern European market. My competitors are ABC. This is my confidential prompt. This is my non-confidential prompt. So you give it a context and you answer all kind of questions we have in order to onboard yourself. So we create dynamic tests. So with that know-how, we create dynamic tests automatically. Of course, we use LLMs in the behind, but we use our own logic, which we basically update every 2 weeks. So the automated perspective is absolutely given. And I can tell you already from some, let's say, image attacks or phishing attacks, we have been even seeing automated attacks which the human eye cannot see, which I was very, very shocked positively that this can even happen. right? Because normally you would use the human in the loop as well. So, and continuous why, it's as I explained before, you're changing your system prompt, you're changing the context, you're changing a few words, you're putting new functionalities, you're changing the language. That's why we also say don't put like safeguards immediately to that and make them too aggressive, because then you will also hallucinate. Try to be more accurate and try to update the system prompt. And that's what we offer. Yeah, when you give us the original system prompt after the new testing, a round of new testing, and we give you the recommendation to a new and more hardened system prompt. Hardened system prompt can have changes which are basically impacting your attack surface.
I wanted to ask you last, what's coming up next for Splx? I saw on the website that you have some exciting updates coming up. I would love to hear more about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's as I said before, everyone is talking about agents, and but it's not only about agents; it's about transparency. I think, as we spoke also about compliance and governance, I think transparency is the number one word for this year, which means builders, AI practitioners, CISOs also, and their people, they want to understand what's happening where, now, and why, and how, for example, what kind of databases are connected to those kind of agents, what kind of other toolings are connected, where can a SQL injection happen, which kind of processes or applications are talking to which applications. So basically creating a transparency and dependency checker we call Radar, which is a fully open source project, so everyone can access it, and use it for free. I think Monday it will be live. It's basically giving builders the full transparency of AI workflows in order to know later and to go, okay, I need to do red teaming activities on ABC. So you don't go black box testing, or you don't go just out of the blue, but with the transparency and dependency checker, you know actually in the workflow, in the flow map, where to drill down and which kind of application to red team as well.
That sounds exciting, actually. I would love to see it live. Obviously, if it's open source, we can also test it internally as well, so we can share some feedback.
We can pen test it as well.
Yeah, exactly. I know you have to go, Kristian. Thank you so much for joining in. It was a pleasure. For those who want to check, I think the domain is Splx.io. You can go find more about the company.
.ai.
AI, sorry. Yeah. I'm still 5 years behind,
You're not AI.
Yeah, I'm the blockchain days. All right. Thank you so much for joining in.
Some now, our domain is sometimes blocked anyway, sometimes because of the AI.
Yeah. Someone is red teaming you, basically.
Yeah,
okay.
Indeed. Thank you for the fruitful talk. Indeed.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate it. Quick and dirty. Yeah. All the best.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Home run. Okay.
Really good.
accounting, sir. You inquired about an employee of ours, Agent Richard Gill.
Yes.
Our records indicate he's deceased.
What?
That was probably the most AI-ish hacking attempt I've ever seen.
And that's prior to the era of AI. So what do you think? Like this is 1995.
Yeah.
Pardon me if I'm quoting the year wrong. What do you think of the representation of hacking in the early 90s?
Well, a couple of things. First, the banking the vault is internet connected, which was quite surprising to start with, especially in 1995. I would expect maybe that the camera is the only thing which has some internet connectivity in this area, but not Now, they used a gaming machine to actually hack into somebody's account and then decline their card. First of all, most of the gaming machines are not connected to the internet to start with. Let's say we can use an ATM for the purpose, and we can somehow open the ATM under the deck where you have the USB ports, and you can eventually play with the ATM, and then you can inject something and you can make the ATM to connect to the banking server somehow and do certain operations that you instruct him to do.
I think they're using the ADSL cables. Was that the name of the phone cable connection?
Yeah, it was back in the days with the modems, which were like connecting to the internet for 15 minutes.
But what do you think about the whole visual representation? You know, I think it was very graphic, you know, for back in the day. I've seen this movie like in the 90s when it was like a dream for people to become hackers.
You know, the visual representation actually is quite logical because it shows how the traffic is going via different media. So they are showing how the traffic goes on the copper media cable, how it goes on the computer motherboard, for example, and they're just showing the packet flying on different medias until it reaches the final destination, and where the packet gets it gets opened and gets delivered to the destination, and then in each packet there is a payload, instructions, what to do, some commands, and some text, which is like the actual contents of the computer packet. And then when you deliver the packet and the system on the other side reads what's in the packet, then this is clear instructions what the system needs to do. So I like the representation. I like the video and the flying traffic. That's how it works actually in real life. Of course, it's not like with two commands, I'm just stopping the card. That's impossible. First of all, you need to get access to the banking server. It might be authentication server, it might be the transaction server, or a place where you store the credit card numbers. In fact, in 1995, it was quite easy to compromise banking cards. It was like such an easy game that everybody was doing it. Nowadays, there is so many security controls in place which are preventing this, and it cannot happen just like that. Now you have CVV numbers, you have additional layer of security, then you have the PIN number, you have biometric data. Before you can use your card, you can access your card. Then when we talk about the actual servers storing cardholders' information, these are quite secure nowadays. Nobody will just leave cardholders' data over an unprotected server. So
There's a framework for this, right? For the card holding. It's something that people need to comply. Is that
It's
the
a regulation, PCI DSS, which protects payment card holders' data.
And what do you think is the chance of a modern CISO to use a password god to access all the systems?
Modern CISO maybe will not use it, but modern people responsible for storing card holder data, which is not necessarily the CISO, they have a very high chance of using this kind of passwords.
Yeah, it's good that the systems don't allow you to have less than eight symbols passwords.
Every system now demands that you have a multi-factor authentication or some sort of, at least if you don't have multi-factor authentication, you can authenticate with single sign-on, which is again limiting the use of weak passwords and is regulating how you establish secure connection to the remote server. So that's actually helping nowadays. You cannot just use a plain simple password to authenticate in your banking application. Mm-hmm. That's impossible already.
So let's say in principle, the movie, because this movie, I know that you don't know a lot about this movie, but it wasn't extremely popular in the year that it came out, but it became very popular later on. It has a dedicated fan base. There's a lot of people that seen it a lot of times, not only because of Angelina Jolie, of course. I think we're going to look at this another time as well. There's some other very interesting, I would say, scenes out of this, which are related to some form of, like, let's say, physical hacking. I think I've mentioned to you once they access things with the coins and things like that. Very, very, very fun back in the day. But it does seem that they ably, or I say it skillfully, communicate towards the principle of distributing information, right, with the graphics. Because it's for people who are, not professional, this might seem like complete fantasy, right? If they don't know anything about it, but actually they spent, I think, some time, and they actually made it very well in terms of communicating it from a director to a viewer.
They're actually visualizing the communication itself pretty well. So right now, if I ask you, do you know what happens if I send you a message from my phone or my laptop here on the table to your laptop? Do you know what happens with the communication? Probably maybe 90% of the people, they don't actually know. They think that my laptop is just jumping information to your laptop. But in fact, before my message gets delivered to your communication channel, it's traveling a long, long way with many distant servers and many gateways and devices on the route. So first of all, my laptop will be sending this traffic. It needs to convert the traffic in a binary format to start with. And binary media is already something that you can distribute, you can exchange over different media channels like copper media or wireless signals, or if I'm using Starlink, then it's going to be a different way to communicate. Yep. But my binary traffic is getting sent somewhere to a gateway server, and then this gateway server looks at the source and the destination, and then there is traffic routes which are regulating how my traffic gets delivered to yourself. And then if the traffic gets encrypted, it gets represented in a different format again, and it turns into a cipher. Then this cipher is again traveling in some frames, in packets, and then packets are encapsulated into frames. And this traffic actually travels many, many different devices on the network. And these devices, they have communication protocols, and they know how to send the traffic and where to deliver it based on the protocols which were predefined for the communication. And then only then when my traffic finally arrives at your computer, then it gets decapsulated again, and then it becomes readable again, human readable format. Then you can read it, and based on this, you can reply. You can send me back your message, and it travels maybe the same way, maybe a different route. It takes a different route, which is already shorter at the time, or faster, maybe, not necessarily shorter. And then it travels again like 10, 20, 30 different devices on the network. It goes via the network, mobile network operator, for example, my network operator, then your network operator, then some domain name servers on the internet, and finally it gets back to me so that I can read it. So this visual representation in the movie, it was like a very good representation of what actually happens with the traffic in the internet and how complex the network system is, how many devices are taking part of this communication.
Yeah, I think obviously I'm a fan of the movie, but I also think that the whole representation of the data blocks and just kind of like in an easy way for people to see and visualize something that they might not be familiar with was great. But that being said, before we started recording, you told me, what is your favorite hackers movie? So which one is it?
Actually, that's a movie which I'm currently watching. It's called Zero Day with Robert De Niro. It's a TV series on Netflix, and this one talks about a 0 day which disables very critical communications all across the world, and it's switching off traffic lights, it's disabling power grids, it's preventing people to communicate, it's disabling the network, the mobile network, so pretty much disconnecting the whole society from the internet and disconnecting the people from each other. And then it becomes a chaos. The whole city turned into a chaos. The whole world turns into a chaos because the power grids are overheating. They start exploding. The fire guards, they cannot get to the power grids to set the fire off because the traffic lights are not working. There is huge traffic jams. People cannot communicate with each other. They cannot call each other. So if you think about it, it's pretty scary. And there is some protective mechanisms which would never allow such thing to happen in real life. But imagine what if this will happen?
That was my actual next question. How real these scenarios are, and I'll throw like a curveball with something that happened like years ago. I don't know the date. I forgot the SolarWinds one, right? So that was like something which was, I guess there is a terminology for this, but this was staying hidden for a while. It was kind of like a cover, maybe, I'm not sure what's the precise word, but it targeted precisely, I think it was an oil network or it was an electricity network in the USA, right? And it actually caused a disruption, but it was not very long. So how realistic are scenarios of like global scales?
Let's say global scenarios are not going to be very long. You said it. So if something happens, so SolarWinds was a major product. You know that there is so many companies using this product. And when there is, if something happens tomorrow with Google, let's say, or Meta, or I don't know, another famous provider that everybody is using, and this provider stops working, it might cause a huge disruption to like a very large group of the society, but just because they've been all using the same vendor. Now, if I'm using Google and Google gets compromised, I'm gonna be disconnected. But if you're using Microsoft, you're not gonna be affected by this cyber incident. Most probably, you might be. And then there is some recovery options in place. Usually these kind of organizations, they have a very good high availability in case something happens. They have a very good business continuity plan, disaster recovery plans in place. So they have like very strong procedures. If this server gets disconnected, if this line goes down, if somebody is swimming in the ocean and decides to cut the big wires on the bottom of the ocean, what happens after that? They have backup for everything. So in a matter of seconds, minutes, or mostly hours at most, they will recover the communication. They will have everything sorted.
I'm straying a little bit away, but there is a topic on the internet right now, or maybe last year mostly, that local infrastructure, let's say building your own servers might be more secure than doing cloud. Do you have any opinion on that? Do you have any observations in terms of infra?
Well, let's start with the fact that cloud is actually, before all, a typical infrastructure. It's somebody else's server that you are borrowing, that you're renting.
It's not actually in the clouds, right?
It's not actually in the cloud up there. So when it's raining, the cloud is disappearing. But the cloud is actually a physical environment somewhere, physical servers and traditional network, but it's managed by someone else. So am I able to protect my server? Now, if I'm running a server in my spare room in my apartment, eventually I might not be able to secure it. I don't have very secure internet connection. I don't have any backup, any recovery options. So if something happens, if I'm out of electricity or if my internet goes down, the server goes down. I cannot keep my server up to date with the latest patches and updates simply because I'm not 24/7 available to manage this server, to manage this operating system. And then also, it very much depends how exposed my server is to the internet. Now, if I'm using my server in an isolated environment and I only have access when I'm at home from my local area network, then there is a very high probability that nobody else will ever discover this server, which makes it pretty secure already. When you consider that the cloud is public, available to anyone, yes, of course, there is network segmentation rules in place. There is some traffic regulations which are allowing or denying specific connections to the server. Usually the cloud providers, they take pretty good care of the security. But if we want to manage something by ourselves and we're absolutely dedicated to managing this specific server or system, or if we have like 5 people who are just supposed to manage the system, then eventually running my own server is going to be the better option. But if I don't have time for this one, if I'm a startup, if I'm a small fintech business and I want to run my application somewhere, I would rather go for the cloud option, and I would go for the full managed service by the provider. So I would not get the infrastructure, but I would actually get the complete platform ready for use. I'll just deploy my application, and I would let the cloud provider deal with the security, given that the cloud provider is a well-established one and they follow good security baselines.
Yeah, I think that also consideration is probably going to be business operation. Let's say, when do you want to launch something? I think most people nowadays with AI, they want to launch fast. So building your own infrastructure might turn out to be more expensive just because of the time spent. But yeah, I think it's probably business case specific. Some people might only have to have on-prem servers. I'm not quite sure about critical infrastructure.
Never running on the cloud.
Yeah.
Critical infrastructure is quite isolated, usually inside the, let's say, the control rooms. You don't even have access to the internet. And if there is some access, it is just one-way traffic for eventually reporting purposes. If they have to report to the government, let's say emissions or some statistics, then they have a way to actually extract this information with sensors from the power grid components, from the critical infrastructure components, and then they are actually sending this traffic to an external room, which is already somehow connected to the internet via secure protocols.
Yeah, makes total sense.
Yeah.